I can't believe I'm saying this, but a few Republicans are finally pushing back against Trump. They're trying to stop his push to militarize America and beyond, and derail an authoritarian project that would leave him constrained only by his own idea of morality, which is laughable on its face. But they're showing up, and they're making moves designed to hit Trump where it hurts. We're going to get into the Republicans blowing up Trump's Greenland plan. Now multiple Republicans and at least one senator. But first, if you enjoy the channel, hit like and subscribe. It really helps support the work. Now, here's what one Republican senator is doing to stop Trump. And here's what you need to know that's being kept quiet about Trump's plans, laid out by Democratic Senator Chris Murphy in this clip.
Meeting with the foreign minister of Denmark and the foreign minister from Greenland. I just wanted to give you a readout. What I thought was remarkable is that they talked to us about how the entirety of Greenland and the entirety of Denmark right now is focused on whether there's an invasion coming from the United States of America. Network ratings for the coverage of the foreign minister's meetings in the United States broke records in Denmark and in Greenland. We talked about the fact that the American people don't support military action. The people of Greenland have zero interest in joining the United States. This would be a cataclysm. The United States going to war with Europe. No one in Greenland wants that. Nobody in Europe wants that. Nobody in the United States of America wants that. And so we're trying to show Denmark that they have support on both sides of the aisle in Congress, but we need our Republican colleagues to speak up right now. We need our Republican colleagues to say what they know to be true, that there is absolutely no reason for these provocations. We had an article today that suggested, unsurprisingly, one of Trump's billionaire friends has some pretty big business interests in Greenland. So as we're trying to understand why Trump wants an invasion of Greenland, part of it is probably to distract from his corruption domestically, but part of it may be that he's got friends who can make money off of the United States taking more control over Greenland or taking total control over Greenland. So I thought this was a good meeting to show that there's Republicans and Democrats in the Senate that are supporting Greenland, but it's not enough to do these private meetings. We need Republicans to speak up.
I just left a bipartisan meeting with the foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland, and I want to give a quick readout. What stood out most was how seriously both countries are taking Trump's threats. Right now, the entire political conversation in Denmark and Greenland is centered on whether the United States is preparing an invasion. Coverage of their visit to Washington has broken television records in both countries. We talked about the fact that the American public does not support military action, and that the people of Greenland have zero interest in joining the United States. It would be a geopolitical disaster. The US going to war with Europe. Nobody in Greenland wants that. Nobody in Europe wants that. And nobody in the US wants that. We're trying to show Denmark there is bipartisan support in Congress, but we need more Republicans to speak up. They know these provocations are unnecessary and reckless. There was also reporting today suggesting that one of Trump's billionaire allies has major business interests in Greenland. So as we try to understand why Trump is suddenly fixated on Greenland, part of the answer might be domestic distraction, and part of it might be financial. His friends stand to profit if the US takes partial or total control of Greenland. The meeting was productive, and it showed that Democrats and Republicans can stand with Greenland, but private meetings aren't enough. Republicans need to say publicly what they already admit privately.
I called Germany. No, we will not do that. I said, no, we're going to put a 25% tariff, which is, by the way, about 7 times more than they would have to pay by raising the drug, like 7 times. This wasn't like a little bit more, 7 times more. And I may do that for Greenland too. I may put a tariff on countries if they don't go along with Greenland, because we need Greenland for national security. So I may do that. I'll give you a little, I'll take you out of that. In fact, that'll end up being the story. But actually, this is a much bigger story because we're reducing healthcare by
Trump said that when he called Germany about drug pricing, they refused to cooperate and threatened a 25% tariff. He framed that tariff as a massive penalty, claiming it would cost 7 times more than simply raising drug prices. Then, without transition, he jumped to Greenland and said he might impose tariffs on countries that don't support his Greenland plan, arguing that the US needs Greenland for national security. He added that the tariff threat would probably become the story, but insisted the bigger story was that his administration was supposedly cutting healthcare costs by unprecedented amounts.
Tell us, if Donald Trump is set on buying or occupying Greenland, what can your visit here, what can the Congress do to stop him? Because it hasn't gone away now for a year.
I think it's an important message for the people of the Kingdom of Denmark to understand. And I don't want to go into a basic civics lesson here, but we have 3 separate but equal branches in the United States. The executive, the presidency is clearly one, and you're hearing from the executive branch. The Congress also has a role. The Congress has a role, certainly when it comes to spending authorities. The Congress has a role in basically helping to facilitate the message that comes from our constituents to be reflected in whether it's legislation or appropriations or actions or measures that can indicate, again, the will of the Congress. And I think it is important to underscore that when you ask the American people whether or not they think it is a good idea for the United States to acquire Greenland, the vast majority, some 75%, will say, we do not think that that is a good idea. This senator from Alaska does not think it is a good idea. And I want to build on the relationship that we have had. As Aya and I penned in an op-ed about a year ago, Greenland needs to be viewed as our ally, not as an asset. And I think that's what you're hearing with this delegation.
The senator was asked a pointed and somewhat uncomfortable question. If Donald Trump is intent on buying or even occupying Greenland, what power does Congress actually have to stop him? She answered by stepping back to explain something fundamental about how the United States functions as a government. She didn't want to give a full civics lecture, but she emphasized that the American system is built around 3 separate but co-equal branches. The executive branch, represented by the presidency, is only one of them. And while the president can make international proposals, send signals, or float provocative ideas to foreign governments, he does not govern alone. Congress, she noted, has real institutional power in this context. It controls spending, appropriations, and the legislative tools that reflect the will of the American people. If the president wanted to pursue a radical or unprecedented move, such as acquiring territory or initiating a de facto occupation, Congress could effectively block it by withholding funds, refusing authorization, or passing measures that convey the opposite intention. In other words, Trump cannot unilaterally invade, buy, or annex Greenland simply by saying he wants to. She then underscored what may be the most important point: public opinion. Polling shows that when Americans are asked whether the United States should try to acquire Greenland, roughly 75% say no. They don't support it, don't see a benefit, and don't want to pick a fight with Europe over territory it has no interest in leaving. As a senator from Alaska, a state deeply connected to Arctic affairs, geography, and international cooperation, she made her position clear. She doesn't think it's a good idea either. She went further, reframing the entire premise: Greenland should not be viewed as an asset to be purchased or absorbed, but as an ally, a sovereign partner with its own interests and democratic will. She reminded the audience that she co-authored an op-ed over a year ago defending this idea, and that this bipartisan delegation is trying to reinforce that message to both Denmark and Greenland, that the United States values partnership, not possession, and that Congress is willing to stand against unilateral, destabilizing actions by the executive if necessary. The subtext was unmistakable. Trump may want to project power in the Arctic and pursue a geopolitical fantasy involving Greenland, but he does not control the entire U.S. government. And he certainly does not control the democratic will of Americans or Europeans. Congress has tools to check him, and the American people overwhelmingly oppose the plan.
You don't threaten a NATO ally. They've been a great ally. We've had bases on there since World War II. Denmark has fought with us by our side in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I feel like it's incumbent on folks like me to speak up and say that these threats and bullying of an ally are wrong. And just on the weird chance that he's serious about invading Greenland, I want to let him know that it would probably be the end of his presidency.
He argued that you don't threaten a NATO ally. Denmark has been a reliable partner for decades. The United States has operated bases on Greenland since World War II, and Danish forces have fought alongside American troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. That history matters. And it isn't something you bully or undermine for political theatrics. He said it's the responsibility of leaders like him to speak up when an ally is treated this way, because threatening or coercing a NATO partner isn't just undiplomatic, it's dangerous. And on the off chance Trump is genuinely serious about the idea of invading or forcibly acquiring Greenland, he warned that such an action would likely mark the end of Trump's presidency. Neither Americans nor Europeans would tolerate a crisis of that scale, and no alliance could withstand the fallout.